So for those that don't want their video to be posted in YouTube, so we'll be posting this in YouTube afterwards. You can switch off their camera. Yep. And so good evening and good afternoon, guys. So today we'll be talking on mobilizing on the ground. We have 4 speakers here. First one will be Aroe. Then we will continue by Sharan, Nicole, and Mathini. And so this one is like a co-join between UK and Malaysia group, education task force. So I will let Aroe to take a lead in today's session. Aroe.
So I'm going to share my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You should end your screen share first so I can share mine. Okay. Okay. Should be able to see. Okay, can you see?
Yep. Clear.
All right, cool. All right, hi everyone. My name is Aroe. I'm from Klima Action Malaysia. Well, it's a bit awkward because I feel like most of you guys already know me and my work, but it's important at least we record it and show it to the other members later on so they can catch up, because I'm pretty sure we have really good sharing today. Today I was asked to share my thoughts and experiences on climate protests in Malaysia, and I do have a bit of experience. I mean, I'm not an expert, but organizing with KAMY has kind of taught me some things, and I can share with you some of my experience. And I mean, all of the protests we have done so far is not just organized by us, but it's also organized with other civil societies in Malaysia. So it's not just KAMY. So I'm going to go through some of the protests with some pictures, protests that we have organized, give a bit of context and share how these protests happen, kind of like the process, but very basic. And finally, the challenges from my perspective. So this recent one is, so for every protest, we usually have like a hashtag to communicate it to the public. So this one was the very recent in March 2021 during the global climate strike. So it was called Bangkit for Iklim, and we did like a die-in at the National Monument here in Kuala Lumpur. So this die-in was kind of important to show that if we fail to safeguard our independence and democracy, we will not survive the climate crisis. So that's like kind of the main message from the protest. And this one was in September 2019. So like before COVID started, this one's one of the biggest protests that we have done. And this was basically during the transboundary haze season at that time in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. So we wanted to raise that issue, but also at the same time to raise awareness about the climate crisis in Malaysia. So this was quite monumental, like around 3,000-4,000 people marched with us in the streets. And there was a lot of media coverage talking about this and talking about climate change, which is really great. And this was one of the protests we called My Climate Rally. And this was also in Dataran Merdeka in July 2019. So, I mean, you can see like the picture here pretty much explains everything. I think you can guess who was behind that mask. So it's basically like a dying earth, and you can see like tombstones around it with messages that's relevant to the current issues at that time. So we have, you know, animals dying, we have something about democracy, something about the indigenous people, and so on. And let's see, I think next one is, well, this was one of the smaller ones that we did. This was in Dataran Merdeka as well. Dataran Merdeka is like one of the most important place, and it's always like the spot for people to protest in Kuala Lumpur. So it's really important that we do it there. And yeah, this was one of the smaller ones. We did it during month of Ramadan. And this was just a small one. But at least we got the message out there. We got to talk to the people on the ground. And yeah, next one is it loading? Yeah. So this was one of the earliest one that we did in Sogo, KL, also another hotspot for protests in Kuala Lumpur. This was called My Climate Rally as well. And this was in April 2019. I think this is like the first time I mean, for me personally, I got the gist of, you know, how it is organizing a protest with people and actually joining you behind you, and you know, you have to face authorities and stuff. So this was like the first time I guess I understood that. And besides protests, we also do like die-ins in Kuala Lumpur. So, you know, this was also important before any of our protests, because we need people to, you know the message, when it's gonna happen. This was like building momentum. So die-ins is also, we do quite a lot of die-ins when possible. So that's also what we do besides protests. So this is just like a video snapshot, but yeah, you can see. So how do these protests happen? So I'm going to explain like kind of behind the scenes from all the protests we have seen just now. Well, I mean, of course, like different protests, they have, you know, we do it in different spots, and all of it, they have different circumstances. So in most countries, I mean, in Philippines, in Indonesia, I think, in most countries, we still need to send notice to the authorities. That's for the safety of others, not just the organizers. But in Malaysia, however, I feel like, you know, the process that they make us go through it's quite tricky and a bit challenging, you know, especially for people who are just starting. So first, I think whenever we organize a protest, it's always important to figure out what is the aim of the protest. Why are you doing this? Because later on you need to communicate this to the public, right? So it needs to be strong, it needs to be solid. And second is really important. I think you have to organize with others, because one thing that I've learned is that you need a lot of experienced people behind you to make all of this protest happen. And it's also helpful to have like moral support with you. So in our case, we were very lucky to have lots of civil societies to organize the climate protests with us, and, you know, giving advice on how to do it properly and to make it smoother, basically. And like I said, in Malaysia, we still need to send notice to the police. Otherwise, they can, you know, accuse you of organizing like an illegal assembly or something and twist it around the media. And this is what we do as well in Malaysia. So I mean, for everyone that has organized protests, they know that this process is kind of like one of the most tiring process, because they put you through a lot of things, and if you don't have the right people behind you helping you out, it can be really stressful. So, and also when I say here, consider your safety, it's not just about the safety of the organizers, us organizing the protest, but it's also the safety of others who join the protest. This includes when people march in the streets, like for example, there's a lot of traffic, you need to make sure of those safety. And safety also includes legal support, medical support, and so on. So I think one of the biggest thing that I've learned is organizing at one spot, and another one is, organizing a rally is like a totally different thing, because, protesting at one spot, you have to check one area, you have to make sure the safety of one area. But when it comes to a rally, it can be, depends on the distance, right? It can be like 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer. So you need to make sure, like, along the way, those roads are safe. And what are you doing to make sure, as an organizer, what are you doing to make sure that that road is safe for the public or whoever is joining the protest, that it is safe to join? What if usually there's gonna be, like, for climate protests, usually they have younger people joining. So how are we making sure they have parents with them? How are we making sure the traffic is clear? So that's, I think, of course, rallies, I feel like the hardest thing to organize. But that's from my experience. And going into the challenges, there's a lot of challenges, but I kind of wrap it up into 3 points. So like I said just now, as organizers, you have a lot of things on your shoulder, and because everyone that attends your protest is basically under your responsibility, right? So whatever happens, your name will be put out there, you will be dragged to the police, something. And if it's not organized properly, if you're not talking to experienced people, if you're not organizing this properly, then a lot of unexpected thing can happen. So it's really important. This is one of the challenges. And of course, for people who are starting out, intimidation can be the biggest challenge, because intimidation from authorities drains a lot of your energy. If you don't have good support, you might break down and just pull out. And whether it's on the streets or getting called later on by the police, it's kind of the same. It's still scary, especially for young people, young groups. So that's why I said a lot of support is needed. So this is like one of the, this is from July 2019, when Nadia, one of our team members, was called to the police in KL. And that picture was just from the streets. Next one is, one of the challenges is making sure that our message gets out there. So, strong, solid A message for your protest. So you need to make sure that by the end of the protest, that message is still clear, it's still out there and communicated properly to the public. Because like we see just now, like a lot of challenges can be out there, and it can kind of bury the issue that you really want to put out there. And there's also possibility of people hijacking your cause, hijacking your protest, or the media and authorities twisting it around, burying the message. So yes, it is a big challenge to put the message out there despite whatever happens at the protest. And the media and authorities, I feel like they always try to find any flaw in the protest so they can report it. And by the end of it, your message won't get out there. So it's really important that you create like statements, you have people, right, representatives to speak out, and yeah, making sure everyone is safe, because if, for example, you go to the streets and people get hit, that might be go to the media coverage, but not really your protest. So it's really important. And yeah, that's it from me. That's exactly 14 minutes 13 seconds. Okay, that's it from me, Deva. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for the great speech. Yeah, observe all your protests around the KL area, the die-in, so on. Yeah, thank you for having all the protesters. Yes. So next, you have Sharan to talk about greenwashing in Malaysia. Sharan?
Okay, thank you, Deva. Okay. Good evening, friends. My name is Sharan Raj. I am the National Coordinator for Environmental and Climate Crisis Bureau under the Party Socialist Malaysia. Yes, I'm a politician. If that's a question everybody always wanted to ask. Now, moving forward, let's talk about greenwashing. Okay, so what is exactly greenwashing? This is something that we need to define. Okay, but greenwashing, to make it very simple, is basically trying to mislead the public. Okay, and you can do it by terminology repackaging, using jargons, manipulating it statistically. One of the very reason what a lot of oil and gas corporation doing now is emphasizing on carbon avoidance, how many carbon which they have prevented from being released. And a large of these culprits is largely not only corporations, but government. There's also specific public relation agency established just to do greenwashing for these kinds of corporations and government. Now, the major issue with greenwashing is that it is wanting to protect the status quo. So people like the oil and gas, the fossil fuel power plants, and the institutional investors, the banks, for them to continue profit with the existing technology and the existing system. So this is what we call status quo. Okay, and when you look in the climate crisis battle, it is largely people versus profit. Okay, it's largely planet versus profit. And when you talk about greenwashing, it is not only occurs in Europe or Americans or in wealthy nations. It actually happens a lot in Malaysia, and it's actually swept under the floor because a lot of people cannot read through the lines. And when it comes to greenwashing, it's simply said as the devil is in the details. So I'm going to share you three very common examples. Right now, the first example, carbon intensity. So in 2009, then Prime Minister Najib Razak, who led Barisan Nasional, said that Malaysia is 40% in carbon intensity GDP. So, and when you period of time, that Malaysia actually nearly double its coal usage, particularly in Peninsula. So what you're looking now is the coal increase for electricity generation in Peninsula. And for those who doesn't know, Semenanjung consumes 80% of all electricity produced in Malaysia. So Sabah and Sarawak is just 20%. Now, when we use so much of coal, yet then Najib also said that Malaysia was on course to reach a 40% reduction by 2020. So as shocking for it to seem, I mean, how come coal is increasing, but then we are also reaching our carbon target? So what everybody missed out was this word, carbon intensity. Okay, so what is exactly when you carbon intensity? So the carbon intensity per GDP basically is taking the amount of carbon that you're emitting and you divide it by your GDP. So as long as your GDP keeps growing faster than your carbon emission, your carbon intensity will definitely come out. So this is a way of protecting your status quo, where you can continue to pollute, but yet on paper, you look as if you have done a good progress by reducing your carbon. So for common people, they will think 40% reduction in carbon intensity means 40% reduction in total carbon emission. And truthfully, it is not. Okay, so this thing is known as coupling. It's a statistical manipulation. Okay, so you couple your progress with a reduction parameter. It can be a GDP, it can be a population, it can be anything. Okay, and Malaysia coupled it with GDP because our populations have actually grows at about 1 to 2% per annum, which is quite small. But our GDP grows at between 5 to 8% per annum throughout the last decade before COVID slowed our progress. Okay, so they found out the highest reduction parameter, which is GDP, and they couple it with your carbon emission, and they reach the greenwashing they want. So on title, everything looks great. We are reducing 40%, but in truthfully, are we reducing? No, we are still a net emitter, and we have been emitting above the baseline ever since. Right now, the example number 2, install capacity. So this has been very recent over the past 1 to 2 months, where everybody was talking amazing. Malaysia is going to increase its renewable energy capacity. Everything looks amazing. And the best part, when you look at the numbers, you're talking about 31% by 2025 and 40% by 2035. So everybody was saying, wow, Malaysia is going to be 40% renewable in 2035. Well, briefly on that numbers correct. But what they do not understand was they forgot to read these 2 things, which is install capacity. And for non-engineers, they will be like, install capacity is actually 2 different things than generated electricity. Yeah? So when you talk about capacity, you talk about the output, the maximum output that a power plant could churn out at any given time. And the electricity is the energy. Okay, so install capacity does not represent energy. So when you look at coal, it could take in fuel for 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days, and it runs non-stop. And the coal power plants in Peninsula, in Semenanjung, runs non-stop unless there's a breakdown, unless for a maintenance. Okay, so in that sense, when you look at coal, it produces nearly 7 times more throughout a whole year for the same 1000 megawatt rating. Because when you look at solar, it can only generate power when there is sunlight. Sunlight is the fuel for solar, and it's about 6 to 8 hours. Right, and it can drop up to 4 hours when you have rains or something like that. Okay, so when you do that, what happens was, okay, so Malaysia's installed coal capacity, the Semenanjung coal capacity is only about 45%. So coal represents only 45%. But when you look, amount of electricity it produced in 2020 was nearly 2/3. Okay, so when you measure by installed capacity, it looks like, oh, coal is only about 40%, fossil fuels is only about 90%, and renewable looks high. But in reality, renewable actually produced less than 4% in Semenanjung last year. Okay, and this still will be the case in 2035. That fossil fuel will disproportionately produce more electricity and, of course, churn out carbon dioxide compared to its renewable counterparts. Okay, because renewables is only running for a short period of time, and this is how they actually measure progress using a technical term. So general public, general people will be measuring us like, oh, our energy capacity is 45%. But in non-engineering people, non-technical people, what they think is that 45% of our electricity is from coal and 30% is from renewable. They will look at the amount generated. That's what runs in the mind. But in reality, it is saying the numbers of power station, which is renewable as well as coal, but it does not say the proportion of energy that comes out. And we need to measure proportion of energy, because proportion of energy comes from respective power plant dictates the absolute carbon emission that comes out for the electricity setup. So this is what we call as terminology repackaging. Okay, so we put some sort of jargons. They are not wrong, but common people, 99% of the people may not read through the lines, neither they would have made the effort to understand what does install capacity means. Okay, so when you look, when the minister made the announcement, it sounds so revolutionary, except a handful of people, progressive engineers, a certain analysts, infrastructure policy analysts were criticizing them, saying that this is really not good. This is not anywhere close to good. Okay, so now the third one, carbon avoidance. This is the #1 favorite manipulation undertaken by the petroleum companies, right? So now let's just briefly look at Petronas. They highlighted the amount of carbon avoidance they have made. And a lot of oil and gas company, they will always compare the amount of carbon they have avoided compared to business as usual scenario. Okay, so it looks very great, and the amount looks big. You're talking about megatons, million megatons, and so on, right? But what happens is that people fail to see the amount of carbon emission that comes out. Okay, so as for climate crisis, we need to reduce, and we need to reduce our carbon emission absolutely. So we have to measure the amount of carbon coming out and move backward. We should not measure the amount of carbon avoided. So all of these petroleum, oil and gas company, corporations, power plants for that matters, they will always say that, okay, I have the right to pump out, say, 100% of carbon emission, but we are only pumping at 92%, so I've saved 8%. So you should celebrate for that 8%. No, we should stop celebrating the 8%. We should talk about the 92%. So this is one of the biggest methods used by oil and gas, which is talking about carbon avoidance, right? I mean, it's good. You're not pumping out more, but we need to talk about the one you're pumping out. So these are the common factors. And when you look, when Deva that day spoke to me about greenwashing, at that same day, this news came out. Okay, and this news say that 800 companies, one of the biggest corporations on the planet, finds rampant with greenwashing. Okay, and they use all these kind of methods we have highlighted, including more sophisticated methods to actually hide their carbon emissions and to promote themselves as if they're doing really great. But in truthfully, they're actually greenwashing themselves. Okay. Now, that is all from me. My name is Sharan Raj from Party of Socialist Malaysia. Thank you very much. You guys can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's my username, SharanRaj281. Thank you very much. Over to you, Deva.
That was a nice one, Sharan.
Thank you very much.
Very insightful on how the energy consumption and how they are using the words to manipulate the normal citizens around us. Okay, so we'll go to the next speaker, Nicole. Share her.
No, I think I got it.
Yeah, you can.
My thing. Can you see my screen? Does it work?
Now I can.
Okay, if it doesn't work, you need to be back here for backup. Yeah, thanks, Sharan. I have questions for you later. Yeah, it was very informative. Okay, so I have 15 minutes. So hi everyone. My name is Nicole. I'm a campaigner at KAMY, and I'm also in general human rights defender and researcher, human rights researcher as well. So today I'm going to be talking and giving you a brief, is my screen loading? It is not loading. Oh, okay, Deva, I think you need to share the screen. It's like lagging a lot. Sorry, beep boop beep, technical difficulties. Okay. Okay. Can see now? Okay, cool. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Okay.
Yeah, so today I'll just be talking to you, explaining to you what KLNFR is and what the issue is, as well as how what the coalition has been doing so far and what are the successes and challenges that have come up from that. Okay, next please. So maybe to give you, for people who don't know what this issue is about, the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve, which I will be referring to as KLNFR, is a forest reserve in Kuala Langat, which is in Selangor. And right now it's only 958 hectares, but guess what? It used to be way bigger. It used to be almost like 7,000 hectares back in 1927, but now it's this. And it's a very important forest for, there's a lot of like different animals, a huge ecosystem. It's a peat swamp forest as well. And there's a bunch of Orang Asli communities who live around the forest, and the forest itself is their ancestral land. So it's very important to them. And basically last year, okay, next slide. Okay, so basically what happened was last year in February 2020, the government suddenly announced plans to degazette almost the entire land of the forest. For what? We don't know. You know, it's been 1 year, we still don't know why. But what we do know is that 2 companies put in proposals to develop the land. One of them is state-owned, and another one is a company that is linked to the Selangor royalty. So that is incredibly dodgy. And so far in the past year that we've been campaigning, the reasons that they've been giving on why they want to degazette the land is that firstly, the forest fires have degraded the forest. There's too many forest fires, and that it's going to be a fire hazard for the surrounding area. And this is despite efforts by the forestry department and the local Orang Asli communities nearby who have been doing conservation efforts of rehabilitating the forest. And apparently around 2.2 million ringgit has been put into these rehabilitation efforts for the forest. So don't know what that is about. And then the second reason was, so they said that the land now, because of forest fires, has less amount of species, less diversity in terms of like the flora and fauna that you find there. So therefore it's not worth saving. We should just develop it. Yeah. And another latest reason or promise that they gave us was that, oh, don't worry, we'll degazette this forest and we'll replace this degazetted land with new areas in another part of Selangor with like other parts of the forest. So, and technically that is legal according to our Forestry Act. So yeah, don't know what that's about. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so this is, so the next few reasons are kind of like the main reasons. What are the impacts of like degazetting the forest? So firstly, it is a climate crisis issue because that whole peat swamp forest is a carbon sink. Yeah, it's a carbon sink, and if you degazette it, it's going to hugely impact our ability to reduce our carbon emissions according to the Paris Agreement. Not only like it's a carbon sink, it's also going to endanger, like I said, it's an ecosystem. So there's a lot of already endangered species like the sun bear, the pygmy flying squirrel, and like some fish and a lot of other species that I have not named here because I've forgotten it. Yeah. And yeah, okay, can you go to the next slide, please? And yes, like I said, it is Orang Asli or indigenous ancestral land. So they don't live on the forest itself, but it's a really important it's a really important forest because they use it. It's a huge cultural significance to them. They use it to like get herbs. They rely on the forest a lot. And I'll explain more about it later. Okay, yes. And then the third slide, please. Yeah, so as I said earlier, like in addition to all the like terrible reasons the government gave about why they need to degazette this, overall the transparency around and accountability on this whole issue has been very poor. At the town hall session that happened last year in September, they invited a selected amount of NGOs and only a few people were let in, or Asli as well, and they didn't give their reasons there, and they put it at a very far inaccessible place to get to, and they continue up until this day. They continue to give different excuses. That it's for development, it's for the betterment of the Selangor citizens, and they're not basically cooperating or willing to listen to us at all. Okay, next please. Okay, so there's a lot of words, so please bear with me. So the coalition is made up of 15 NGOs, if I'm not mistaken, and it's like a kind of like a wide variety of people, NGOs. There's like environmental groups, there's women groups, there's human rights groups, there's Party Socialist Malaysia too. Yeah, and so like I said, this whole thing began last year, February 2020. And since then, the Orang Asli groups were organized. This is before lockdown. So they were organizing, they were submitting their objection letters, and they also had an in-person protest in the before times. And yeah, so they were organizing. Then the coalition slowly got together, and around March, we managed to get online petitions. And we managed to get like 43,000 objections from the public and different NGOs sent in. So that was really amazing. And then in September 2020, that was a town hall that I shared with you. So a few of the NGO reps went there. And then in October, we launched a huge campaign. Signed a huge campaign asking our MPs to basically officially take a stand and object the degazettement by like officially stating, yeah, I'm against this degazettement. And it was a huge social media public awareness campaign as well. So, and that was a huge success because in November, the State Assembly approved a motion urging the state government to protect and preserve the gazetted forest reserves in the state. However, this motion is not legally binding. So it's like, it's very good, but it still can't like legally stop them from degazetting the forest. Yeah. And fast forward to now, in February, we still continue the online petitioning and the public campaign, and this is all online because we were still under lockdown. And in May, right before our most recent lockdown, we launched a Postcards from Tomorrow campaign, which is like a slightly different online petition. It's more like a public awareness campaign. We got people to write in postcards and send it to us. What are their like hopes and dreams for the KLNFR and for Malaysia in general, but we're still on pause for that because of lockdown. Okay, next please. Okay, so I just shared with you all those things, right? All of those things are what we've been doing for the past 1.5 years, yeah, or almost 1 year. And yeah, I just wanted to break down and kind of explain what goes on behind the scenes. So we'll start with the bottom layer because that's the most important. So it's a lot of time goes into coalition building, which is like a lot of meetings, a lot of planning, a lot of getting to know each other and figuring out ways of working. And like all the things that I share with you, it involves many hours of meetings, decision making, and just deliberating with each other. I think Mathini is like gonna talk about this more, but it's like a huge, it's very, very important. And without this coalition building and like the relationships that we have and the amazing people who are part of this coalition, like we wouldn't be able to have achieved all those different things. Yeah. And like if you notice that we kind of like changed like from online petitions to like the campaign that was the Postcards from Tomorrow campaign. So, you know, as a coalition, a lot of effort, well, like there's a lot of planning involved, right? And we need to try to figure out, okay, this works, that doesn't work. So there's a lot of like flexibility and adaptability that the coalition needs to take to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then all those things at the bottom, which is the foundation, kind of like result in all the different things that we do, which is putting out media statements, appearing in all the interviews and speaking in articles and media appearances that I didn't list out last in the previous slide, but we were consistently throughout the whole year, we were appearing on a lot of different media. And not only that, the social media campaigning, the toolkits, the website and online petition, a lot of technical like work needs to go into like building the website, like creating the toolkits for people to get involved, and all the stakeholder engagement. That's a lot of like, not in person, but just like relationship engagement with the specific stakeholders that you need to, like whether it's MPs or the forestry department, for example. And lastly, this has been really difficult to do because of lockdown, engaging and featuring orang asli communities in this whole like advocacy campaign. Because of because of the lockdown, it's very hard to get them to even speak. For example, at this webinar, like because of in connectivity issues, it's hard for them to just like, hey, we want you to talk about this here, or even like we want to meet them to like update them. Like we have to do it in person, and we can't do it in person during lockdown. Yeah. Next, please. Yeah. So in my last 2 minutes, so like I said, I think I'm just summarizing things I've said. One of the successes was, yes, getting the motion passed at the State Assembly and getting the support of many MPs. And a lot of people have spoken out about this. I think because this has been going on for like since last year, and I feel like we've been able to sustain a high public awareness. Like, for example, people like Yuna, who's like a local celebrity, knows about this issue and like will like talk about it because of all the campaigning we've been doing. And it's been featured on local media, international media, as well as like different international human rights organizations have picked this issue up as well. Like they're aware about it. So that's really good. Yeah. And then the main challenge is throughout this whole period, we've been organizing through 3 different lockdowns. Oh my goodness. So imagine if you're an activist and you've been doing advocacy, last time everything we can do in person. Now we have to shift online, we have to try different things like the postcards from tomorrow, and we're still trying new different things, new different ways to engage the public. And that is all from me. Thank you for listening. Oh, and if you want to find me, you can find me at Nicole FWS. I did not put a thank you page like Sharan. These are my sources. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Let me just cut this off. Okay. So I think I was there during the forest at the PHSKLU with orang asli. I went with Nadia, I guess, last time to do a webinar. And it was quite chill and it's quite cold, quite a nice place. So I'm quite fearful that, one day they will just destroy the place and it will be no more. It's quite sad what the governments are doing. So, okay, next speaker, I'll go with Mathini.
All right, let me share. Thanks, Nicole. It was really worrisome, educational. It was every time, talk about Kuala Selangor, it gets me very angry. So try to share. Lama, where is it? Okay. Right, so, okay, hi guys. So you know me, Mathini, I'm with KAMY and currently part of the secretariat for GDI, Gabungan Darurat Iklim, also known as the Climate Emergency Coalition of Malaysia. So today I'm going to talk about that, precisely that, mobilization of Climate Emergency Coalition of Malaysia. So yeah, many of you know who KAMY is. So we are climate justice movement, which is a youth-centric movement, and we advocate for vulnerable groups such as women and indigenous community. And we collaborate with various organizations, when it comes to climate action. Moving on. So these are the pillars, climate action pillars we call, that we try to abide by when we do our work. So it has to do with civil society facilitation, citizen assemblies, coalition building, advocacy, gender responsive, and community resilience, and climate inventory. So a lot of the main theme is collaboration, mobilizing various CSOs and NGOs, and we try to avoid being in working in silo, because we know in order to put climate action at the center of policy making, we have to mobilize as much people as possible, as much as experts and CSOs as possible. So yeah. So having that in the, staying true to that principle, we came up with Gabungan Darurat Iklim, also known as Climate Emergency Coalition of Malaysia, GDI. So who we are a coalition of civil society organizations, very recently formed in 2021. So our focus is to address Malaysia's response to climate emergency, through concerted actions. And also the mission is we seek to see Malaysia recognizing climate emergency and also implementing long-term greenhouse gas emissions resilience reduction when it comes to greenhouse gas emission, and also resilience and sustainable plan, and also uphold ecological justice and empower Malaysians to become climate resilient. And our mission is to build a just and resilient Malaysian society to allow us to face climate-related challenges, and also to stop all actions that are destructive ecologically, to the world, and Malaysia in particular, right? So this is the structure of GDI. So GDI committee is made of key members from various organizations, and we have clusters as well as working group. And clusters is made of fields that are impacted most by climate change. So we have food security, climate justice, energy, biodiversity, community resilience, and waste. So a lot of members of these clusters are experts in the field, CSOs as well as individuals. So they provide us, the committee, with recommendations when it comes to each of the fields. And we have working group to actually mobilize each of the recommendations. So for example, we have letter drafting group, which I'm part of. So we are currently drafting letter to be presented to the government with each of the recommendations, and also to push for climate emergency. And we have education working group who's working on building capacity building when it comes to each of the clusters that we discussed about, or beyond that, by organizing webinars and stuff. And also we have campaign group, which would actually mobilize or lobby for the letter or the call that we have put up in the letter, to get sufficient signatures for us to be noticed by the government. So that was a pretty short talk. Oh yeah, right. So what we seek to achieve. So the objective is to advocate for the Malaysian government and all sectors to acknowledge and declare climate crisis or emergency. So that's the end goal, to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, all right, or within 1.5 degrees Celsius, with accordance to the Paris Agreement. So thereby to incorporate climate action and resilience into all sectors and development plans, with special focus on vulnerable sectors or people who are most at risk, and also to educate, empower, and increase capacity of all Malaysians to face the climate challenge competently, take up good ecological and resilient practices in all aspects of their lives, and join the global movement for ecological justice, especially when it comes to climate justice. All. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mathini. That was a short talk. Looks like we are on track. All right. I think we'll jump into the Q&A session. For time to pop up the questions that you all have. think Nicole had some for Sharan.
But bagi other people chance first.
Yeah. So anybody would like to ask questions regarding the four topics we had earlier? So now's the time.
I have a question for Aroe. So Aroe, you spoke about having to get permit, right, to assemble. So is it like constitutionally is a crime? Okay, it's not. Yeah, is it a crime to not obtain a permit to assemble? Okay, Nadia answered. No permits, just a notice. Right, okay.
Yeah, I remember Nadia saying like, you know, you just have to go to police station and just inform them that you are doing the protest.
So it's more of a formality kind of thing.
Yeah.
Deva,
Next
you are
question.
muted.
Yeah. Next question, anybody? Okay.
Taf has a question, I think, on chat.
Okay, Taf was saying, I was wondering how people in the UK can amplify work being done, such as protests. So, Aroe, Nadia?
Oh, I don't know, like on the ground, how people from outside of the country can support, but I guess like sharing it around about the cause itself would be really important. But I don't think like, you know, people from other countries can support like directly on the ground, but maybe like through funds, sharing about the what is being protested. I think that's helpful. Yeah, but yeah, I have no other idea on top of my.
May I say something? I do believe that you know, people from other countries can support the protest. It's the same thing like what we've been saying, how we Malaysians are supporting the protest that is happening in other countries, that what's been happening in Thailand, what's been happening in Myanmar, as the recent police crackdown, even the ones in Hong Kong. We are living in the same planet. Like what happens there affects us as well. So I believe that we can support in so many ways. I think what we have learned from the recent Myanmar crackdown, the how the military coup happened in that country. It's amazing how people from outside the country mobilize information around and doing solidarity calls, solidarity webinars, pressuring our own government to pressure ASEAN to make sure that what is happening in Myanmar what's been happening in Myanmar should not be happening at all. So I think it's critical to have those kind of solidarity between nations, between people, communities. We are, like I said, living on the same planet. What happens there, you know, really reflects us as well. Yep, that's from me. Thank you.
Yeah, looks like few people agreed on that issue. Everyone has to speak up together. Okay, next question.
Okay, if no one got question, I can ask Sharan, yeah. Okay, kind of like comes, okay, one is a clarification question, which is it correct to say then that energy capacity is like macam the coal, is like the coal power plants, like the amount of production facilities that you have for fossil fuels and renewable, whereas energy output is like the final output, like how much is our energy use made up? Like that's the first one, clarification question. Then the second one is, are other countries, maybe Southeast Asian or maybe not, also using the same same tactics or same example that you shared just now in the presentation? And the last question, sorry, is what are the like kind of solutions to tackle greenwashing in whatever country, Malaysia or not Malaysia? Yeah. Besides awareness, I guess, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Okay, now the first one, energy capacity and energy generated. An analogy that would be good is energy capacity will be the size of your car engine, whether it's 2 liter, 3 liter, V6, V16 Ferrari or whatsoever, but it's that. Okay, so and the amount of distance it travels will be the energy generated. Okay, so power plant, when you look at the megawatt, you call it megawatt, that is the maximum output the power plant can give out when you input the fuel. So when you input the fuel, say coal, what is the amount of electricity comes out, gigawatt hour? So that will be the distance travel for that matters. So you can have, say, 30,000 megawatt of renewable energy and you still can have zero energy generated. Okay, this would be the case for some Western countries where they have a lot of renewable energy, but they are curtailed and the electricity from renewable is actually dumped to the ground and they run heavily on fossil fuel. Okay, so it does not really reflect the unit generated or what we call the energy generation mix in the transmission line for that matters. Okay, so you can have a lot of hydropower, you can have biogas, this and that, but if they are not running, they're not producing electricity, you will still have majority fossil fuel. So that's the analogy of it. So we need to look at the distance traveled by the car rather than or maybe. It's not going to pollute. The moment it runs, it pollutes. So that's where we need to look at that. So we need to look at it. So it's best not. You can have the coal power plant, and you may not don't have to run it at all. It will not. So because it would just be.
I think your line is breaking.
The second one, Malaysia actually. Oh, my line is breaking. So, okay. Malaysia actually set a very wrong precedence by using carbon intensity, because before that, a lot of countries were reporting based on absolute reduction based on 1990s level. But since 2009, when Malaysia popularized the term carbon intensity, which is adding another what we call a reduction perimeter. So a lot of countries have started using it. They coupled it with population. Some coupled it with GDP per capita. So countries which use whichever that they have a high growth rate, they use it to mask it out. So now you have a lot of countries, but this is particularly used by developing country and high middle income nations. Okay, and Malaysia with the engineering, financial capacity, as well as regulatory framework, we actually consider developed country by a lot of international organizations. So even if we go and try to take land loans from global multilateral banks, they actually put us interest rate at a developed country's interest rate. They don't really see us as a new developing country or a third world country anymore. So, and in that sense, Malaysia tried to act as if they're a developing country and use the carbon intensity. Actually, to a certain extent, I think it's not wrong to say Malaysia introduced and popularized carbon intensity. Not Malaysia, Najib. Not Malaysia, Najib. I have to get it right because I was not involved in the process. Okay, so he did it without my consent. So most Malaysians does not consent what he told them. So, and that actually has become the stepping stone. When it comes to corporate, when it is very, very rampant using carbon avoidance. It is very, very rampant reporting carbon avoidance. They are not reporting, or it will be in the appendix, or be in the fine print, the amount that they are actually accepting, but they only highlight their carbon avoidance. You can look even some of our state-owned enterprise, our GLCs, our multinational corporations, in their press statements of any of their sustainability report, they will only talk about the amount that they have avoided. But you need to go through their hundreds of pages of annual report to find their emitted carbons. That's where they actually hide that. Now, on the third part, you were saying about what can we do to do a solution. One thing that we can look into is having a standardized reporting mechanism, because now when you leave it as an open-end question, they are employing a lot of data analysts, data scientists, including PR agencies to do the greenwashing for them. And there is actually a thriving industry to mask this greenwashing. I mean, they can't fund renewable, but they have money to fund greenwashing. I find it very hypocritical. So like the United Nations framework, the UNFCCC, they have actually set the standard for reporting, which is quite good. So a lot of countries could not run away, and they have to follow that methodology. But we do not have the same for corporates. A handful of developed countries where the intense public pressure have actually led to standardization of reporting. So a lot of public listed companies are forced to report in that manner. But this is very much confined to European Union, to a certain extent to the Republic of India. Recently, we're seeing it being pushed in Australia. In Malaysia, the Securities Commission and Bursa Malaysia have not really introduced what we call a stringent and proper transparent method of reporting. Although there is a certain extent of reporting, but I still find it is not sufficient to tackle greenwashing. So a standards needs to be done there, and it needs to come through definitely domestic legislation. For the countries, the UNFCCC methodology is considerably acceptable, and it's quite unified. So in that sense, Malaysia can't run away. But where does Malaysia plays around is in their press statement, install capacity, carbon intensity, and so on. So people who really want to know how bad Malaysia is doing, you need to read at the hundreds of pages of UNFCCC report, which can be really tedious and can be technical to 99% of the population. Okay.
Nice. Okay, any more questions? I'll let Nadia take over.
Yeah, I was wondering about does Salma has any question, Rashika? Yeah, do you guys have any questions to the rest of the speakers before I start with my part? My part will be like really brief. Okay, Salma, do you have anything to add? Any reflections? Alia as well. Right, so I'm assuming no questions. So thank you so much for the speakers to come, for making time to actually come to this session. I think the first two sessions are quite experimental. We're still trying to, see what kind of responses we'll be getting, and I'm hoping that the next few ones, I think the next few ones will be public, if I'm not mistaken. Amit told me, and we're hoping to get more public to join the Weaving Hopes education sessions. Right, my part, I think I'll be sharing my screen very briefly. I'll do a quick one, guys, because it's already 10:15. Yeah, all right, here I am. So maybe some of you have not heard about this project, or maybe I've already onboarded some of you. But the current project that we are running is called Weaving Hopes for the Future, and it's a collective initiative between Malaysia and the UK. We have SFGH here as our UK partner. Malaysia, from Malaysia, we have, KAMY and the Greenwashing Project. So the main idea is to empower these indigenous women and youth on what's been happening on the climate negotiation spaces globally, and especially this year is going to be in COP in Glasgow. And ideally, the project has a sort of longer vision that we want this group of people to start training other indigenous communities as well, and come to the consultation stakeholder meetings that KAMY has with the government. I think it's critical to have these voices in, so that they sometimes corporates or companies, they like to do greenwashing because they thought, oh, no vulnerable people are here, so it's fine for them to talk about some bullshit stuff, numbers. But once you have people who are directly impacted by this, you can't lie to a person in the eye. Yeah, unless you are from a fossil fuel company, that's a different thing. But yeah, so the idea is to that through education, activism, empowerment, all those kind of capacity building that we are having right now, where we will, the indigenous community team, there's around 11 of them, they will create creative outputs to be exhibited in COP26. So it's just sorry, how do I scroll down? Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, this is not a slide, this is a sorry, hang on, give me a second. Yeah. Okay. So the art installation will basically be co-produced by 11 indigenous women and youth. I'm sorry I didn't put all of their faces here because we're still collecting those photos and footages. And these are I'm sorry, but I somehow couldn't. Okay, now it's working again. Right. So the exhibition basically tries to eliminate linkages, whatever intersections that we see between climate change, climate crisis, and land rights. I think we have some few indigenous activists that is part of the advisory board of the project, and they've been doing rigorous advisory exercises and advising us on how to proceed with the indigenous classes, and as well as what kind of projects and what kind of outputs they should be amplifying on. So these are really critical, how do I say this? This part about getting indigenous activists, the women indigenous activists to come in is really important, because we don't want to just jump in and then very top down and giving out instructions on how to do things, but we rather want the indigenous team to come up with their own ideas, with their own ideas from their own lens and voices. So that is the aim of the project as well. So the artwork that we are creating, we hope to influence the public perception on indigenous plight during COP26, and how the global community are tied to these struggles. Because like I said just now, what happens at the other end, at the other side of the world, is directly linked to us. It's very true. For example, what we've been seeing, the relationship between the UK and Malaysia with regards to plastics pollution. So a lot of plastics are still being sent to Malaysia. These are some of the linkages, relationships that I think a lot of activists are trying to understand, still trying to unearth all this information. Really great work that is happening right now between two countries. Yep. Yeah, so we are actually although we are funded by the British Council, but certain things we are not allowed to use the funds for example, getting some tools. We have to fundraise ourselves. So we have this ballpark figure around £3,000 that we're aiming for. Mostly is going to go to logistics in the UK, transportation, equipment and material, and if there's an exhibition setup fees, then we have if there's a cost incurred, then we have to pay that one up. So these are basically the main ones that we are aiming for. So I think it's really fair to say that fundraising, especially during the pandemic, is quite tough. But I'm sure that we will get to the target. We have some few strategies and tactics that the PR team is planning, which will be revealed to everyone on August 9th during the Indigenous World Day. But so far, for the fundraising part, it's just like we are aiming to get people to fundraise for the project. And if you guys know somebody who'd like to somehow join and support this project, do let me know. And I'm really hoping that people will be very supportive of this project, and looking forward to share to you guys what the PR team is coming up with. And yeah, it's more towards an interactive public engagement for this project. Yeah, so that's all from me. Thank you so much.
All right, I think we can wrap it up. And yeah, our next session I think will be on 7th of August.
What, Deva? I can't hear you.
Okay, hold on. No, I'm just talking about the next session, which is
Right.
COP26 and climate governments. I'm hoping that we can make that public so that we can get more audience on that.
Yeah, is Amit not here?
Amit, he had to go for another meeting now.
Right. Okay. So maybe I can share on that side because none of